welcome to the ever-expanding world of objective but polyamorous snowboard gear reviews. I'm James Beastie, and today we're talking about the Union Atlas Pro, a binding that's had some minor but very noticeable upgrades, primarily a softer heel pad, what they call a bushing, and it makes this binding much more recommendable than past seasons. And while it still doesn't have the best shock absorption, it's a lot better. This is a damp, responsive, supportive, incredibly adjustable, and durable binding that I think could work for a wide variety of riders. And they've really stepped up the game this year. And it's a binding I'm going to be recommending a lot more than past years. I wish I had the regular Atlas, but Union didn't have one for me to review, and they probably won't have one. But I will tell you this, that the regular Atlas is just this binding now with this softer bushing, a softer high back, and a more damp but less responsive gas pedal / disc cover. So I rode this primarily with my Nitro Team TLS, but I also did get on this with the Battalion Acid Boa. I tested it against the Force on a same day comparison where I rode these one run, then I rode the Force one run, then I put the Force on one foot, the Atlas Pro on the other, and then switched so I could really get an idea of how this binding changed and compares against my baseliner, the Union Force. And just so you know, this is an honest, objective review with zero brand oversight from Union. And I can do this thanks to sponsors like Blower Board Shop that's been selling snowboard gear to snowboarders longer than most resorts have been allowing snowboarders. So if you want to support honest, objective content and snowboarding in general, buy through our links to Blower Board Shop. They're a family-owned business, and they have a very large online presence these days that competes in terms of price, shipping, and customer service against the bigger stores. So let's talk weight. These are 2 pounds, 3 ounces with screws and discs in. In comparison to the Force, these are 2 pounds, 5 ounces. And the Atlas are just about the same weight as the Atlas Pro as well. Now, in terms of Highback Flex, this is a stiffer high back than the Atlas now, and there's a noticeable difference. The Atlas has a channel now through it that gives it a much easier twist and a lot more give going back. And just for reference, against my personal favorite binding, the Force, there's a good bit more twist now and a little bit more give. This has a lot more padding on the high back. This has a very minor, very mellow padding on the high back down near the bottom. And I personally like the give of the Force and the Atlas better in comparison to the Atlas Pro because it has less calf bite. But this still isn't bad by any means, especially for a higher end binding. Now, when it comes to adjustability, Union's All Mountain series, their Atlas Pro, the Force, the Atlas, they're exceptional. They're the best in the industry because they have an adjustable heel loop right here. They also have an adjustable gas pedal with these right here. So you can actually take your boot and center it in the binding and therefore center the binding on board. That is far more important than you would think. So many people get bindings that can't do that, and then they think the board doesn't work correctly or think they have problems with their form, and all they needed to do was get a different pair of bindings with better adjustability and they'd get better response, more symmetrical response. Then you have toolless straps. You have an adjustable forward lean. I think they should have this on all their high backs. And you can rotate your high back so you can line up your high back to the heel side edge and get better, easier, more symmetrical response. And because you can center the boot in the binding, you can turn the discs sideways and slide them tip to tail and get any stance width you want. Not many bindings can do that. They're also the best discs I've found for setback inserts. They even allow a little adjustability with inserts that are 40 mil apart instead of 20 mil apart. When it comes to flex underfoot, this full-size disc with a lot of plastic around it and rubber bushings makes the board feel stiffer underfoot and a little more damp without making the board feel dead underfoot, and that's a good combination. It's not the easiest to butter and play around with. If that's important to you, you want to step away from the Atlas Pro, the Force, and the Atlas and look to bindings like the Falcor, the Stratos, and the Ultra, which have mini discs along with much softer material underfoot that allow the board to flex much easier when it comes to buttering, playing around, and getting the board to twist naturally. Now, when it comes to shock absorption and dampness, this is a big improvement over past Atlas Pros. The bushing here on the bottom still feels similar. It's that harder rubber, which makes the binding absorb chatter and feel much more damp underfoot. But the problem with the Atlas and Atlas Pro is this foam right here used to be that same dense rubber on the bottom. So it was damp, it absorbed chatter, it made like micro bumpy, slightly uneven snow feel less bumpy and uneven. It really kept the edge quiet underfoot, but it didn't have that impact absorption, and it could be fatiguing and hard on the joints. Now look at this. I can actually push my thumb in where I could barely do that before. Then on the gas pedal here, they put a softer material that feels a little better, because the difference between the Atlas Pro's gas pedal / disc cover versus the Atlas was a big difference before, because this forged carbon, while it's more responsive, does not absorb chatter or feel like a smooth ride. So now with this extra padding here and this extra padding here, it's much easier, and going out with a much more smooth, much more shock absorbent binding like the Union Force, having this on one foot and then having the Atlas Pro on the other foot, I didn't feel as much of a disparity between the two bindings as I did in the past. So this is a huge improvement and makes this a much more shock absorbent, much better all-day ride. And while most likely I'll like the Atlas a little better because it doesn't have a forged carbon gas pedal and a softer high back, so it'll give a smoother ride, I still like the Force the best. And while it doesn't have as much chatter absorption as the Atlas and Atlas Pro, it still has more shock absorption, but now it's all within the realm of doable, where before this harder pad right here on the Atlas and Atlas Pro was a deal breaker for a lot of people. And when it comes to turn initiation and response, I felt it was pretty close to the Force. Yeah, just a little bit better. And it's gonna be a little bit better than the regular Atlas. And if you compare it to, let's say, the Atlas Step-On, it's a good bit further back depending on the boot you pair it up with. But if the boot is similar in response to, let's say, the Nitro Team TLS, which is medium fast, the Atlas Step-On is going to be a lot faster. But as far as traditional strap bindings go, this is very responsive. And while I didn't feel it overpowered mellower boards, it definitely likes a board that needs a little bit more demanding ride. And it's interesting too, because this has the same base plate as the regular Atlas. You're really only getting a slightly stiffer high back and forged carbon in the gas pedal. So it's just a bump ahead of the Atlas and maybe a little bit bigger of a bump ahead of the Force, but all three are very comparable in terms of response. These straps are super supportive and this binding feels great. I never felt like I needed more support when I was off-piste. I love how these toe straps wrap around your boot without the ratchet pinching the sides of your toes, and they never come off. And these ratchets are some of the best in the industry. I've never had an issue with these over the last decade. They're incredible. So overall, love the improvement of this extra shock absorption in the heel here, and having this softer material in the gas pedal / binding cover is a nice little addition too. It seems more durable too, but only time will tell with that. And while I still prefer the 2026 Atlas versus this 2026 Atlas Pro and the Force, I think this more shock absorbent Atlas Pro gives you a little bit extra response, but doesn't make you compromise in terms of shock absorption like it used to. So it's a very recommendable binding. There you have it.